Pete Peterson is an old-school, moderate Republican. He's not some sort of hardline conservative. He's a very expensive suit, private jet, mineral water kind of guy. And he has been obsessed for a number of years with restructuring the U.S. economy and particularly restructuring U.S. fiscal policy. This is an important thing to understand. Pete Peterson and the people around him do not want, or are, I would suggest, particularly interested in fixing the debt or dealing with deficits. What they're really interested in is taking advantage of a moment when the United States is looking at these issues to establish a very different approach to a host of issues. And at the core of this is changing the way that we look at retirement in this country, definitely undermining Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, changing those earned benefit programs into something very different than what they've been and something far less reliable, but also making an awfully lot of other cuts in programs that serve the great mass of Americans, while at the same time continuing and even advancing the tax breaks for billionaires and corporations that have helped to make Pete Peterson a very, very wealthy man. He's sold this idea to around 125 other CEOs and very wealthy people. They've all chipped in a whole bunch of money, millions and millions, perhaps as much as $60 million for the current campaign, to this Fix the Debt group. And this Fix the Debt group is the primary proponent in the United States today of austerity. They want to, quote unquote, cut our way to progress, as President Obama suggested. But in reality, it's cutting the way toward progress for them and cutting the way toward a real hard hit for the average working American and potentially a slowing of the economy that begins with the sequester but does not end there.
Well, let's turn to Pete Peterson in his own words. This is from a video posted on the YouTube page of his foundation.
We live in a society of special interests of various kinds. The organizations that are lobbying for expanding benefits and making the problems worse are unbelievably powerful. But who's representing you? And why don't you then get organized in young organizations? And I've had a dream. And my little dream is that one day there'll be 100,000 young people and their parents parading in Washington saying, I'm madder than hell and I don't intend to take it anymore.
That's billionaire Pete Peterson talking about his dream of a revolt in favor of austerity. Lisa Graves, you've come up with the Peterson Pyramid.
That's right. Our team at the Center for Media and Democracy has worked hard to expose the conflicts of interest by a number of the people who are leaders of the Fix the Debt operation. When Pete Peterson talks about the bevy of special interests in Washington, he's one of them. And he's helped seed an organization that's filled with special interests. And so what we've done at petersonpyramid.org is document that. So we talk about how Erskine Bowles, who's famous for the Bowles-Simpson plan, which is another version of the austerity plan, how he's on the board of Morgan Stanley and gets paid over $300,000 a year for a couple hours of work on that board, how he's been paid over $600,000 on the board of Facebook, which recently had a huge tax giveaway. And so that's just one example. That's the tip of the iceberg, and we document it on our site because the people of the United States need to know that this is sort of a Pied Piper operation by Pete Peterson and his buddies to try to claim that the real crisis is the debt, when in fact the real crisis is our economy and the lack of focus on jobs. And as Dean Baker, the great economist, said, you can't cut your way to prosperity. And in fact, it's like saying when the house is on fire, stop putting so much water on the fire to put it out.
Tell us more about who Pete Peterson is, Lisa Graves, and also, have they responded? Has he or his organization responded to Peterson's pyramid, what you have just laid out?
Well, I think Pete Peterson has an unhealthy obsession with Social Security. And, you know, as a man who's never actually going to really need it, but most Americans, in fact, do need Social Security. one of the things you see with the Pete Peterson organizations that he has seeded or created over time is this obsession with Social Security. In fact, Social Security is solvent. It's solvent for at least the next 20 years. It's more solvent than you or I or probably anyone who's watching this show. And yet they want to make sure that cuts to Social Security, changes to Social Security, the retirement age, and the benefits having those decrease over time as people age is part of a so-called balanced deal or a package. But that's a terrible idea. And that's part of the Pete Peterson legacy. He's also seeding these groups to have this sort of youth group element to it, which is really, it would be funny if it weren't so worrisome, where they have put a lot of money into this notion that the youth of America are having this uprising, the dream that he said in that video, when in fact most American students are deeply concerned about the jobs in this country, and cutting our government budget in the ways that Peterson and his buddies propose will make that job climate even worse for those students. Those students are far more concerned about their own personal debt and student loans than the debt that is supposedly being levied on them by Social Security, which does not actually contribute to the debt.
Has Peterson responded, Lisa, to Peterson's pyramid?
Fix the Debt's communications director has responded. He called our office to claim that their organization never claimed that they were trying to raise $60 million. He said, their vice president of communications said that they were trying to raise any amount, not just $60 million. I pointed out we had it on their letterhead, in fact, that they were marking out a campaign worth $60 million to push these issues this year. He basically said that wasn't true. We've got it on paper. You know, I said, you know, that's why we don't really quote the press secretaries, because they're not obligated to tell the truth. We've got the documentary evidence. And so they pushed back a little bit, but quite frankly, we have the goods on them. And that's why this material is just streaming through the internet to show these conflicts of interest, to show the Democrats who are former members of Congress who've left and cashed out and work as lobbyists for some of these big firms, to show the Republicans that continue to do the bidding of some of the big firms that they've joined since leaving office, to show the conflicts of some of these huge firms that are part of Fix the Debt who have a negative tax rate, not 35% like you or me, not 20%, not 10%, not 5%, but a negative tax rate. And on top of that,
like which
we
ones?
Show how many of these firms are underfunding their pension programs.
Like which ones?
Oh, sure. So we have documented how General Electric is one of those firms that has had a negative tax rate. A number of the firms that are part of the Fix the Debt operation have negative tax rates. We've got about a dozen of them that we document on the site, including, you know, major defense contractor General Electric. We have other firms that we have documented are underfunding their pension programs, and we also show how much how well they're funding their CEO pensions while underfunding their worker pensions, and pushing this operation of Fix the Debt, which is trying to underfund every other American's retirement, basically pension program through Social Security.
Isn't the head of GE President Obama's job czar?
Yes, that is in fact the case. And so, you know, we do think that this is a huge, important part of this expose, is to show how this bipartisan pitch from these guys, from these CEOs, and from Democrats and Republicans is unfortunately not a grand bargain, but really a grand swindle.